So hi, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of EDU 307, Philosophical Foundations of Education. And this week we're going to be talking about pragmatism, which is helpful to understand, I think, as a contrast to the first two major schools of philosophy that we discussed and have been discussing for the last couple of weeks, idealism and realism. And keep all these tools in mind because they're going to be important for us to understand the idea of pragmatism. So going back, idealism. Idealism is the image, the idea that's in the mind of us, of the table, of the pictures. Somewhere those perfect pictures, that perfect table, the perfect us exists. And we understand and perceive that out in the sun, beyond the cave, through logic. We can figure out by looking around, by looking at those shadows, really, and remembering those shadows, what that perfect place looks like. We get a glimpse, we get an idea of what that perfect place looks like. And for Plato, that's reality. Realism, the next step is looking at nature and developing our understanding through our senses. So we're not just thinking about or trying to perceive that perfect place, we are sensing matter. And by sensing matter and using our senses, we can come to understand natural law. And just like that perfect place and those perfect images, those perfect ideas that exist somewhere out in the ether, we perceive natural law by using our senses and using matter, and that natural law exists somewhere out in the ether. But realism has put us at the level of what we can experience. And the next step in the process, and kind of a natural outgrowth of the process, is what is an American philosophy that developed probably 400 or 500 years beyond realism and Francis Bacon, and that's pragmatism. And pragmatism is basically what works. So experience, our senses, are as important as they are in realism. However, our senses and what we perceive of the world allows us to operate transactionally. We transact with reality. So rather than just learning about reality through scientific method and then determining natural law, truth and knowledge changes over time as we transact, as we interact with reality. So my interaction with this table, or my interaction with those pictures, or this window, is what determines what I know of truth, of reality, and that's knowledge. Knowledge, truth, we develop through the transaction with that reality, and it changes over time because we don't always perceive things the same way. And the truth of what we're experiencing can look different from moment to moment, day to day, and year to year as we grow and mature. So pragmatism, like realism, is based on experience, sensory experience, but it takes it a step further because we interact with that reality. So we take that experience and we frame a problem, a question. I knock my head into a wall. I know it's hard. I'm going to transact. Maybe I'm never going to do that again. Maybe a good example of sort of the transactional reality that we're a part of in pragmatism is this mallet that I have with me. So I got this from my workbench. The realist would look at this and see wood and recognize the tree, see rubber and recognize the rubber plant, and know that rubber and wood are part of the natural law. And we can see it, perceive it through our senses. However, I can test this and use this in different ways. I transact with it. So I can frame a problem around it. What does it do? I can hold it by this end, and I'm not really going to get too far, but if I hold it by this end, I might be able to use this to knock in a piece of wood, or, as I said, knock on my head. I can feel that, but I'm transacting with this object. I'm transacting with this matter. So the fact that it's wood and rubber, there's a more complicated purpose. There's a more complicated aim to this. So I'm going to experience it. I'm going to frame a question around it. How do I use it? I'm going to brainstorm some solutions. Maybe I try to stand it up, maybe I try to use it and try it out in different ways to see what happens. I'm going to guess what it's for. Looks like I hold it by the handle and use the head of the mallet to wrap something or put something in place. And then I'm going to test for the consequences. That's the transaction in pragmatism. From experience to problem, to brainstorm, to guess, to test. So pragmatism is what works. That means that truth can change from moment to moment. And our knowledge is really based on what works. Truth, knowledge, epistemology, knowing changes over time as we experience more and as we develop. And this is really an American philosophy, and you can see why, because America really by and large has built at least part of its history on the idea of developing what works and investigating what works. So you might say, well, all truth is then relative. It really doesn't have any meaning. There's no absolute or fixed truth to pragmatism. That's not quite true, because there are two tests of pragmatic knowledge. One is the knowledge must be made public, so we share it and we see if it works in the larger frame, right? So we see if other people represent the use of the mallet in the same way. And then that becomes public knowledge and it becomes truth. The difficulty with relative experienced truth, different for everybody, also is that in ethics, axiology, having a relative truth means you can do anything you'd like, and the outcome could be anything you want. So it really doesn't and isn't bound by any kind of law like natural law. But in pragmatism, the test is consequences, remember. So when we look at an action, we want to see what that does in society, in a larger group, because knowledge is public. So everything is out in the open. And that's how truth gets tested. And that's how ethics is developed. What works for the society? What works for the culture, for the group? So pragmatism is designed in Dewey's idea to prepare us for democracy, because school is life. The aim of school is to learn how to learn by asking questions, by creating guesses and hypotheses, and by looking at testing and testing consequences. So even in different content areas, we are looking to learn how to learn in that content area so that we're better equipped as citizens, as members of democracy, as people who can make ethical decisions based on the public good and the larger understanding of truth and whether or not it works for everybody. So that's the idea of pragmatism. I hope that helps. Thanks a lot. I'm really, really pleased again with the good work you're doing and your interactions and your fine thinking throughout the course. Keep it up, probe deep, ask questions. It's part of pragmatism. Oh, and before I forget, the teacher in the pragmatic classroom is the guide on the side. So in addition to having more experience than students and being able to convey and contribute that experience to students, the teacher is also learning along with the student. So pragmatism works for the teacher in that way too. It elevates learning and the teacher works as a guide. So thanks for listening. And I'll see you online and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.